All right, so what we're going to be discussing here is the body's position that we get to the moment our front foot gets into the ground for the very first time. And this moment in time is called our foot strike. So we are going to be talking about the moment when, boom, those feet get into the ground for the very first time. And again, that's called our foot strike position. At foot strike, we want to be looking at our body in two halves. Our upper half and our lower half. At foot strike, we want our lower half to have rotated forward towards our target. And a useful thing to look at to know if we've been able to do that is the belt buckle. And is that belt buckle facing the target? If the belt buckle is facing the target, it's a pretty good chance that we have successfully rotated both the back foot, the back knee, and the back hip. When we're able to rotate the back foot, the back knee, and the back hip, as our front foot is getting into that foot strike position, we will successfully be able to get our belt buckle driving towards the target. If we specifically take a look at just the back foot of these four guys, let's watch as they are rotating that back leg, how that back foot is rotating. At this point in time, all four guys still have their entire foot flat onto the ground, and then they begin to rotate through or over top of their big toe. Their foot kind of rolls, folds over, or drives forward. And as the foot does that motion, we now shift our view to the back knee and know as the foot is rolling over the big toe, that the back knee is also rotating forward. And how those two things, the back foot and the back knee, are working together. We can also see that as we go to drive and rotate that back foot and back knee, how they do that while they gain ground down the mound and towards their catcher. So this is the difference between rotating our bodies forward, or a word for that is driving ourselves forward, versus just rotating in place. If we were just rotating in place, our bodies would not be able to gain this ground down the mound. Our bodies wouldn't be able to accelerate our power and energy down the mound. And we can then look and see that the foot has the toe, and then the heel is in front of the toe, meaning we have rotated forward. We then go to the upper body, the upper halves, from the waist up, and we want to separate that upper body from the lower body. We want the direction that our hips are facing, which is to the target, to be separate from the direction our shoulders are facing. So we notice we can see the Giants, the Padres, the Pirates, and his number. We can see the Phillies, and we can see the Brewers or Milwaukee. I'm not sure what they have displayed on their jerseys there. So the direction of their lower bodies is to the target, and the direction of their shoulders is still facing, for these right-handers, towards third base, or the direction they have been the entire time. So we rotate the lower body first, then we get into foot strike, then we rotate our upper body second. And the more that we can get those lower bodies to fully rotate to the target by the time that front foot hits the ground, and we've also been able to keep that upper body from rotating and staying back, we will have created as much upper lower half separation or hip shoulder separation as possible. And the more hip shoulder separation or upper lower half separation we can create, the more power we're going to be able to produce, and the amount of stress that's put on our arm is going to be reduced. What we're also going to notice is that almost regardless of your arm slot, if we have a true 3/4, low 3/4, high 3/4, an over-the-top arm slot, or anything in between those, we're always going to find ourselves in a relatively 90 degree angle, meaning from our elbow across to our other shoulder, we want to think is nice and even. 90 degrees in that armpit. We also want to think 90 degrees in that elbow. We want this type of arm position, that 90-90, we'll call it, at the moment of foot strike. When our arm has loaded up to this position here at the moment of foot strike, and the upper body has not rotated yet, our body's rotation will accelerate the throw forward. If the arm is not in this 90-90 position, the body's rotation forward is going to be less than ideal and in sync with how the arm will flow after the body goes. So we're looking for this 90-90-ish position in that throwing arm at foot strike. What we can also notice at foot strike is, where is this glove at? It's in front of the body by the rib cage. We're not letting it, if we're thinking here's some water, don't drown the glove. Don't let your glove get wet. Don't drown that glove. This one right here is a little too high. Should be more towards the belt. Okay. When the glove gets finished into the body like this, it's able to help keep this front shoulder in line, meaning it's not going to open up early. Because if that front shoulder starts to open up early, that's going to start to pull the back shoulder forward early. And now we would not have separated our upper and lower halves as much, because the angle of the shoulders would begin to rotate forward, which would be more matching the angle of the hips. The final thing we're going to look at is this front leg. We see all these guys have different degrees of bend in their front legs. But what we're going to notice is that as the upper body now rotates to throw, we need to make our front leg become a firm fixture of which we can rotate around. So thinking about this front leg here turning into a flagpole. My flagpole is always going to be strongest if it's straight. Or at least I can't have my flagpole move forward while my body is trying to rotate forward. So we'll redraw these little outlines here, and we will have these guys. Oh man, that's all right. It's going to get back to it anyway. Boom. And now we'll watch as they go to throw. How that leg is locking out, stiffening up, straightening out. So that now that leg is here. Now that leg is here. Now that leg is here and here. From the bend, straightening it out. And what we can notice is as that leg locks out, stiffens up, straightens out, becomes that firm flagpole, notice how that upper body is able to catapult itself out in front and down more. Able to get out in front more. Out in front more. So that way, if we look, we can't get everyone exactly at release, but ball just out, ball just out, ball is coming out, ball is slightly a little bit more out than the bottom two. But we're able to look at this angle of the chin to the waist, back out to the front foot, boom, boom, boom. Just how out in front of themselves they're getting. And that's because of that front leg's ability to lock out. So we can see that they're starting, boom, boom, there, and there. So now it's not just the arm throwing the ball down. It's the body throwing the ball down. It's the body going down with the throw. Body accelerating down. And as the body's accelerating down, the lower half is firming up. So that way, as I need to finish all this violent rotation, I have the ability to do that around that firm front leg. I have that ability to rotate around. I can finish all that violent rotation from my back leg around. I can finish all that violent rotation from my hips around. I can finish all that violent rotation out of my back shoulder around, giving my arm plenty of time to slow down and giving the back muscles, my scapular muscles, all the time they need to activate and slow down that rapidly accelerating arm. All right, we're going to let your video play through here 2 times. First time will be all one motion, so you can see what you look like, synced up from 2 points of view. And the second time, we'll pause it at that moment of foot strike, so that way we can discuss some of the things that we're seeing compared to the things that we just discussed with those big league videos. Okay, so here we are at foot strike, and let me grab my mouse here. So we can split our bodies into upper lower half. We need lower half to have been rotated at this moment in time of foot strike, foot strike. We need the lower body to have rotated forward. But what we can see is we're landing on the inside of our foot, and that front leg has not fully rotated to get in alignment or facing our catcher yet. And what we're going to notice also is that that belt buckle is still facing us versus getting itself to the target, meaning we have not created any of that upper lower half separation, meaning we're going to have to use all of this arm to power this throw, which is going to minimize how much power we can create, and it's going to increase the amount of stress that's put on the arm each and every throw. So we got to first think about getting this back foot to turn over sooner is in relation to when our foot strikes the ground. We need to get this rotated as much as we can as it's getting into the ground. Meaning, right now, most of your back leg's rotation is going to be occurring after it's hit the ground. Your belt buckle goes from here to now facing the catcher, but it was after this foot has already been in the ground. Why does that matter? Because once the foot gets into the ground, the upper body is going to start rotating around. So now, because the hips are starting to rotate around at the same time the shoulders are rotating around, we have no separation. And it's the upper body's rotation that's forcing the lower body's rotation, which makes the which makes the upper body's rotation slower, because having to drag and pull and rotate this back foot through, and instead of the back leg, back foot, back knee, all that stuff rotating through on its own, and then the upper body being able to come through after, the upper body is having to bring along with it all of this. So as the shoulders are rotating, it's having to bring those legs with it, bring that back leg with it. And that's where the extra stress gets put onto the arm. That's where the loss of power comes from. However, when we do look at that upper half at the moment of foot strike here, we can see that the glove is in a really good location. The glove is keeping us closed with our upper body, which is exactly what we want. Like we talked about in the big league video, we need that 90-90 in our armpit and elbow, and we can just see how big of an angle we have here, which is going to lead to some dragging of the arm coming through, which puts a very tight window of us casting this arm out. Noticing how the ball is not coming from external rotation to internal, but it's coming around. We're really getting around the baseball, and that's because this hand is so far behind us at this moment of time that its path around is going to be big. If it was more up here, its path would be not as wide, not as outside of itself. It'd be coming more through yourself. But because we've gotten into the big angle, it's now going to rotate through that big angle, which now puts it over here. Rather than being in that 90-90, which would put it coming out through here, we're getting around that moment of release. Instead of going through there right now, from that boom, flipping through there, we're getting around everything. And that's because, again, of this angle. So now we got to work back from there and think of why that's happening. Well, we have the hand is in this open position, which isn't an issue, but then we also then sway it back. When I say back, I'm meaning back here. We sway it back so far back here that now the hand has changed directions again. So the ball was facing home. Now the ball is facing second. Now the ball is facing third. So our hand is going through a lot of different positions because of how much we're swinging this arm back with a straight arm. We need to keep our elbows more bent. We don't want to be out here creating this big, huge T, because that big, huge T is landing you into this position here. Quick example of that. This is a very over-exaggerated example. Not really over-exaggerated, but watch how that arm is moving. Versus we can go see how when his ball comes out of his hands in the same direction yours is, ball is facing home, ball is facing home. But watch how Dylan Cease, that ball, his hand doesn't spin around and get it facing any other direction. It just stays right there. I know it's not the most clear, but his went from facing home, facing home, facing third, facing third. Yours goes from facing home to facing second to facing third. And the reason it faces second between home and third is because of how far behind your body it's going with that straight arm. If we're going to load it up that far behind our body, if we're going to load it up this far behind our body, we got to be doing it with a bent arm. So that way it's more the elbow getting back here and not the hand, then the elbow, then the shoulder, but rather the shoulder, the elbow, and then the hand. And that is going to hopefully help us a lot be able to get into that 90-90 position here with that ball up top. And that will then help us when we rotate the throw, not having to get around our throw, around the throw, but we will be able to go through it a lot better, a lot easier. So we got to think, one, we got to get this backside leg to rotate sooner, so that way it can get more rotated at the moment of foot strike. We also need to work on our arm's path, so that way we can get to a 90-90 position. And finally, we need to get that front leg fully rotated at the moment of foot strike, so that way we're not having to wobble to get there. We don't have to get all of the finish of that leg's rotation occurring at the same time the upper body's rotation is going on. We need that front leg to be fully rotated, get into the ground, get secure, get firm, and then we rotate through. We can see your front leg goes from its original positioning with kneecap going towards third, and then barely getting halfway rotated with that kneecap towards home before it hits the ground, and then the rest of the rotation is occurring with the foot on the ground while the upper body is rotating. We want that lower body to rotate first, foot hits the ground, upper body rotates second. Final thing, just because we worked on this and talked about this all winter last year, is we have to throw our chest down and out with the throw, meaning it gets out to here at release. And we can see how tall your chest stays just vertical as you're trying to throw this ball down. Right? Your chest just stayed in this position the entire time. If we looked at really anyone, right? Let's just go from the top. And at foot strike, we'll pause it from the top of his head to his belt buckle. As he throws, ball is just now coming out of his hand here, right? And this is the height he was at. He's out to here. We'll pull up another guy. We'll leave those lines right where they're at. We'll get the slower one. Foot strike. Lines are almost exactly where they need to be. Ball's coming out, and he's almost at that same exact line. Throwing his body down the mound with the throw. Where the body goes, the arm will go. We don't want the arm to ever be going by itself. Okay? If we just pull up the two guys that we used before, we can do that as well. So foot's down. That's his tall posture. We'll even slide it back so it fits him perfectly. Boom, right there. We back it up. Ball's coming out right here, and he's fitting that same line almost. All right, so then if we take you back to your moment of foot strike, we put you there. We play you out. If we can see at your moment of release, boom, you're there only. We need to be getting that trunk out to here, your shoulders out to here, your head out to here, your shoulders are out to here. So we need to slam our bodies down with a throw. Throw your chest, and the arm will follow. All right, so your video is going to play here 2 times. First time will be all one motion so you can see what you look like synced up from both points of view. And the second time we'll pause it at that moment of foot strike so that way you can compare and contrast your body's positionings to that of which we just discussed with those big league video examples. Okay, so here is that moment of foot strike. And like we talked about, we split the body into 2 halves. The lower half we want to have been rotated at this point in time. And what we can see is that that back foot is still flat in the ground. It has not done anything yet, which means this back knee doesn't really have much of a chance to rotate if the back foot is fully flat into the ground. And therefore, if the foot is fully flat in the ground and the knee can't rotate forward, there's no way this back hip is going to start rotating forward. And when those 1, 2, and 3 things do not occur, the belt buckle does not get rotated towards the target. So we can see the back leg has not done any rotation yet, which is going to make the front leg almost impossible for it to rotate because they are going to want to rotate together. And when we look at the front view here, we can see that that front leg has in fact not rotated. And the first way we can tell that is because you're hitting the inside of your foot first with the ground, but more so we look at that kneecap and we can see it's facing over here when we need it to be facing the target. What we can also look at to know that is we look at that front hip, we look at that front foot, and then we look at that front knee, and we can see that the knee is not in a good alignment with the hip and the foot. So we were working on this after you got off the mound, which was the drill to get you to learn how to rotate this front leg, how to get that front knee rotated to the target, versus just trying to step over here in hopes that that gets the back leg to rotate. Or we're just kind of stepping this way, that way, hoping that that's going to rotate our hips. But we can see that that does not do it for us. And now we have ourselves anchored in the ground with our body entirely facing the same direction it started, which is very less than ideal for us as a pitcher who's going to be making super aggressive throws downhill over and over and over again. We need to utilize our body to make that throw. Right now, with how you're moving your body down the mound, we're having to use all arm to make that throw. So as we get out of foot strike here, we're going to see that that front leg goes through its rotation. Coming up right here. Boom. By the time that front leg, and let's move this out of the way, by the time this front leg gets itself finally in line, the ball is well already out of your hand. We can also see by how we're releasing the baseball with that hand open, how it's kind of like, we're just kind of like hoping I get it guided there. Kind of just a really like, because we can even see it in your mouth on this view over here, how we're kind of like, just trying to get it out of our hands. And we're trying to just fling it forward like a dart right here, because your arm, your back shoulder trying to rotate forward right now is having to rotate against all of this lower body that did not rotate. So instead of being able to use that lower body to turbo boost this arm is having to rotate while having to drag this back leg around, while having to push this front knee out of the way. And now we get into this very awkward position that we're trying to throw the baseball in. We're very vertical rather than getting out in front. Our arm entirely is in front of our body with that ball still in our hand, which is not good for our elbows health at all. So there's just a lot of things that are not going our way early in our delivery, i.e., aka the back leg rotating, the front leg rotating by the time we get into foot strike. Because neither of those are occurring, that's putting this arm in a super, super risky, super inconsistent command, low velocity, and just high stress positions. So in addition to that front leg rotation drill, we need to go on the mechanical drills playlist and look at back leg rotation drills. It's probably the first or second video on the playlist. We need to be working on that. We got back leg rotation, front leg rotation. That's all we're going to focus on right now. It's just getting our lower body to rotate to the target by the time this front foot hits the ground. Not doing all of its rotation after, because the lower body is not actually making those rotations anymore. It's this backside making it for them, which puts this backside in a tremendously higher category for injuries, a dramatically lower category for velocity, and dramatically lower category for command. Those three categories, we want the opposite effects than what you're getting for us to be a good, consistent, successful pitcher on the mound. All right, so we're just going to let your video play through here 2 times. The first time will be all one motion, so you can see what you look like synced up from 2 points of view. And the second time, the video will get paused at that foot strike position, so that way we can compare and contrast your body's positioning to that of which we just learned and discussed with the big leaguers. So here we are at that foot strike. We split the body into 2 halves, upper half, lower half. We can see that your body wants to stride slightly across itself or in a slightly closed positioning, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just going to make certain movements that we do after this a little more difficult to be consistent with our timing. But again, nothing that we can't discuss and work on and explain what those things are. And then if we want to make the decision later that we would like to try to work on getting this stride to be a little bit more direct to the target, meaning we're landing that foot a little bit more like over here rather than here, we can. But for right now, the direction of the stride is not something that is going to be discussed. What we're going to look at first is position of glove, and we can see that it's in line with our body. It's starting to get outside of ourselves, but it has been in a position of swiveling, so we should assume as it continues through that it will continue that swivel in a good position, which it does. So our glove path into its finish is really good. Okay. What we're going to look at next is that 90-ish degree angle in our arm, which we do have. Right? It doesn't need to be a perfect 90-90, right? But we're close to it, very close to it here. So everything that we're seeing with our upper half at the moment of foot strike is looking good. Would we like to have this front shoulder still be more here, closed, rather than starting to open up? Yes. But it's close. So an easy thing that we could try to make sure that when we land, that shoulder's more here versus starting its path of getting, we watch it on this side here, we watch it kind of roll out. Boom, there. It kind of rolls out as we get into foot strike. If we don't want that to occur until after foot strike, then we got to get that shoulder to stay more closed for a little bit longer. So something that we could do would be to get this glove to either stay in this lane as it travels out for longer before it starts to make its way over. Right? So we can see it stays in this lane, and now it's coming out of that lane. So if we could keep it in that lane for a little bit longer before it starts to come over here, that means it wouldn't have as much time to get itself outside. Or what we could do is not worry about it trying to keep it in that lane for longer, but just allow it to travel. Instead of thinking about keeping it in this lane for more time, we could think about gaining extra time by having it extend further away from our body. So instead of the shoulder to elbow being in this direction and then the hand in this direction, we get that shoulder and elbow more here and that hand more over here. So now that glove is here, which is just a little bit of time difference between it getting there. And that's all we're looking for is just that little bit extra of time. So the first thing we can think about is just keeping this glove a little bit closed for a little longer. Keeping it a little more closed for a little more length of time. And that's going to help us keep that front shoulder from wanting to start to open early. Let's focus ourselves to the lower half. And we can see, like we talked about in the big league video, that back foot, we have that heel in front of the toes. But what we can see is that back foot hasn't quite fully turned over yet because we haven't rotated through that big toe like we talked about with those guys. If we continued this video, so here's foot strike, and we just keep watching that big toe. Now we're folding over that big toe. Now we've turned it over. Now that back hip's going forward. Right, so watch this back hip. So we got our foot, bam, into the ground. Back hip's right here. Now we watch this back foot, the back toe, fold over itself. Boom, and now look where that back hip is. Look how much more that back knee is rotated around. Now, if we zoomed out, now this back leg looks like all those other big leaguers' back legs at their moment of foot strike. The only downfall is by the time you get this back leg into that good positioning, we see how much our upper body has already begun to rotate around. When we stride across our body, it's going to make it that much more difficult for this back hip to get rotated forward, which means it's going to become all that more important for us to learn the timing of this back leg's rotation, specifically for you when we rotate through that back foot, in order to learn when we do it, to learn when we need to do it. And right now, we need to do it a lot sooner than we currently are, so that way we can complete it by the time that foot gets into the ground, not having it get completed after the foot gets in the ground. because we want it completely rotated while that upper body is still in that squared up position in our 90 arm with that glove right in front of our chest. So our two main things is going to be glove path to help us stay closed longer, and back leg fire sooner, so that way it can complete itself earlier, and earlier means by the time we get into foot strike. Everything else flows pretty well. And obviously, like we talked about at practice, was get that leg nice and high. Okay? We want high leg lifts, right? If we think hip height, that's not even a good straight line. If I think hip height, we're barely even getting that knee there. Or if I think from my knee to my hip, I want to get that flat or parallel with the ground, we got some ways to go with that leg lift height. So if we just pulled real quick, random guys here, boom, boom, and let's go, boom, boom, and let's go, boom, 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 and let's just open all these guys up. Willy-nilly random dudes, way up there. Way up there. Up there. Way 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 up there. At least that knee is slightly higher than that hip. Up there. Okay? So, glove path, leg lift height, back leg rotation timing. This one will be relatively easy. The leg lift will be relatively easy. Once we get the feel for this, this will become a lot easier to work through. So we'll look at the playlist on YouTube of mechanical drills, and we'll want to look at the drills that are titled backside drive or back leg rotation. And those would be the drills that are going to help you learn the feeling of the back leg rotating. And once we learn the feeling of the back leg rotating, we can start to determine when we get that feeling to occur. And when we need it to occur right now is sooner than it currently is. All right, we're gonna let your video play here 2 times through. The first time will be all one motion so you can see what you look like synced up from these 2 points of view. The second time, we'll pause it at that moment of foot strike so that way you can compare and contrast your body's positionings to that of which we just discussed with those big league video examples. So here we are at foot strike. And what we're going to notice right off the get-go, we're just going to go with the most obvious looking thing is our lower body's positioning. We are very much in a split squat position right here, which is very much going to be indicative or a sign of us just spinning this back leg in place. We're just rotating this back leg in place versus rotating us forward. Another way we can tell that is as this front leg is rotating itself around, it's not also gaining ground. It's not also gaining ground because this back leg is not driving our body down the mound, so that way us as a whole gains ground. So if we just watch this front leg and we kind of just draw like a line, that's not a good straight line. That's about as straight as I can get with a trackpad. We can just see how as your leg is rotating, it's just kind of setting itself into the ground, setting itself into the ground, setting itself in the ground. And the reason it's just setting itself down in the ground and not rotating and also landing out in front is because this back leg is not rotating us forward. It's just rotating us in place. Just rotating us in place. Okay. Then we get to, boom, that foot strike position, and we can see that that front leg has not gotten itself fully rotated either. So it rotated in place. It's rotating in place, and it hasn't fully rotated by the time that front foot hit the ground. So our first two things that we need to be working on is rotate our back leg forward, and that means it moves our body forward. So we need to rotate ourselves into foot strike. The second thing we need to think about pertains to that front leg, and it's we got to rotate it more and we got to stride it out more. But the stride out more is going to come when the back leg drives us out, because this type of bend right here is going to be impossible to lock out of. And lock out meaning straighten up, stiffen out, because we have basically that 90 degrees in our knee right now. All those big league videos that we saw, and we can even just throw some up here real quick. We'll just pull some random dudes. Okay. And we pause them at their moment of foot strike. Okay, boom. We can see how it's here. That. Oh, sorry, got an alarm going off. Gotta shut this down. No, we'll probably keep going. Okay. And then here's that angle. Let's get Kyle or Max Fried, who's a lefty. Let's not do him, just so we can keep these lines going. Peter Fairbanks. Boom, there's his foot strike. So front leg fitting the bill rather similarly there between those two guys. Let's get Kopech. His moment of foot strike. Also fitting the bill pretty similarly there. Martine, lefty, don't need that. I'll go with Mitch for our final one. Foot strike. And about the same thing, right? So then we bring you to these same lines. Okay, and we're going to have to make you a little bigger to get them to kind of match up. Okay, and we can just see how your lines would be there, right? So we can kind of see that slight difference between those two of being out in front with this one here versus being in place with this 90-degree angle one. So we need to rotate our body down the mound, not just rotate our back leg in place. We need to rotate that front leg fully and also get it extended out more. After that, it's going to make, hopefully, this wobble of the knee, this sway of the knee, not get, obviously, nearly as much because it should be rotated more to begin with. But then we got to hope it doesn't get into this angle, because now energy is going over here. Now energy is getting pulled down this way. It's getting pulled down this way, which means it's getting flung up this way when we need it to be firing this way. So because of that positioning of that front leg, it messes with our upper body's ability to rotate out in front and down. And we can see your body's positioning here, we get you to release, and you're only here. That's not a whole lot of using your body to make that throw, right? That's not a whole lot of range of motion. We're looking to get like out to here, like double the amount you are. So if we just pulled a couple big league videos for the last comparison here, let's scroll down the list a little bit, get some different guys, pull these random dudes up, and do the same thing. Here's Paul Skeens from LSU. Foot strike. Let's go release. There. TJ's a submarine, like low guy, so that's not going to be the greatest example. Okay, starts here. Gets out to here. That's a side view one, or a angled side view one. I'll see. Well, getting out even further. He's out here. Bam. Same thing. Getting out to here. So we need to slam our chest down with our throw. Right now we're just spinning that upper body in place. Why is that spinning in place? Because the back leg was spinning in place. When the back leg spins in place, our body can't get driven down the mound as well. And if our body's not driving down the mound as well before front foot strike hits, it's going to have a whole heck of a lot difficult time to drive itself down after foot strike. That's why we need the body moving down the mound before foot strike so we can slam it down with our throw after foot strike. So first thing, rotate this back leg and drive our bodies forward with that rotation. Second thing is get the front leg fully rotated and extended out some more. And then the third thing is drive our trunk down with our throw. Which ultimately, with the two first things, the front leg and the back leg, that should hopefully help us lock this leg out instead of it bending forward, right? Because like we saw in the big league video, we don't want this leg going over. We don't want that. We need to lock out and stay behind that.